Welcome to the Armchair Trader podcast. And this week we have a very interesting company that we actually like a lot to discuss, and that is ProStar. Today we have the CEO of ProStar on the podcast, Paige Tucker, all the way from the US. Just as a reminder, ProStar is listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange, TSXV, under the code MAPS, M-A-P-S, and also on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange under the code 5D00. We're going to go into a little bit more about what the company does and some of the aspects that we really like about it. So welcome to the podcast, Paige.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
This is quite an interesting company, and it's very unlike anything we've come across before. Can you give us just a sort of a brief overview of ProStar, what it does, and what the core technology is?
I sure can. What we've done here at ProStar is we have designed a patented mobile and cloud software solution that's offered as SaaS, and it provides the ability to precisely capture, record, and display the location of surface infrastructure and also subsurface infrastructure, including buried utilities and pipelines.
This is something that is of great use to people who are drilling a hole in the road. So we see it, all over the world. Guys come along, they dig a great big trench in the street. There's, in fact, in my own street at the moment, there are some guys doing exactly that. And in some cases, they don't get it exactly right, and they go through somebody else's underground infrastructure at the same time. That can be gas pipelines, that can be power cables, that can even be fiber optics cables, as we learned to our cost here last year when the broadband disappeared. That can be extremely costly, and this is the solution that you have is something that a wide range of users can actually utilize, can't they?
Yes, absolutely. So actually any entity that's involved in either the construction, maintenance, or repair of infrastructure would benefit from this product. For example, even if you're just repairing, say, for example, a major roadway or a highway, anytime you do any type of repair on those roads, there's a high probability that you're going to damage something that's buried below the road, because that's where the majority of utilities and pipelines, and as you mentioned, fiber optic cables, water systems, they're all buried below the road. So it kind of works both ways. Anytime you're working on the road, you can damage the buried utilities. Our system is designed to significantly minimize the risk of hitting anything that's buried below those roads. Because, for example, here in the United States, we have over 500,000 strikes a year on utilities. And those are the ones that are reported. We know that it might be twice that, because a lot of times they'll just go, oops, and they'll cover them up and move on to the next job and hope nobody notices that they actually, hit a line. You realize that when the power goes out, or all of a sudden there's flooding in the neighborhood, that's usually when people realize, when it's a little too late, that a line has been hit. But that actually works out to about a strike every minute of every working day. And it's only getting worse. And of course, United States, our infrastructure, is fairly young, if you will, compared to other countries' infrastructures, and in particular, the UK and throughout Europe.
Yeah, I did some homework on this for the UK, and it's the estimate is that the average strike here in the UK costs about £20,000, and total is about £1 billion worth of damage every year just in the UK from people doing exactly this. And the thing that struck me about ProStar is that people are still that inaccurate, and what you're bringing to the table is a solution that considerably enhances the accuracy for anybody doing this, and ensures that the chances of them damaging anything under the ground is much reduced.
Absolutely. I mean, basically what we've done is we've taken an industry that is still in many ways implementing very antiquated business practices and workflows. And we've just modernized it with new technologies that in many ways we use every day, in our private lives. But a lot of times we don't take those same technologies and implement them in our professional lives. And the reason for that is, change. We're humans. We don't necessarily like change unless it's considered in some ways a major advantage to start using a new technology. We use the word disruptive. Disruptive in many ways just means that we're completely changing the way that it used to be done, and we're adopting a new way. That's a major change. But a lot of these businesses have been using the same business practices, for maybe a decade, 2 decades, or even 3 decades. So it's very difficult to get them to change unless you start to see a high adoption rate. And we're starting to see adoption here in the United States and in Canada, implementing our technology from some of the largest construction companies, engineering and surveying firms, and also U.S. government agencies. So once you start to see that level of adoption, then it can kind of, work its way down throughout other organizations and government agencies. And that's what we're starting to see here now in North America. So I think eventually it'll cross the pond, if you will, and we'll start seeing some adoption in Europe.
And I guess it's important to emphasize that your business is already relatively mature. We're not talking about just a startup in a warehouse. You actually have a lot of important strategic partnerships, and you have some pretty big clients in the engineering and construction space already.
Oh, yeah. We have Fortune 500 construction firms, government agencies, including State Department of Transportation, especially here in Colorado, where they actually mandated our software, which means that all the utilities, all the construction companies, all the engineering and surveying firms, basically anyone that's involved in the life cycle of managing buried utilities that are on a government right-of-way, by law now, are mandated to use the ProStar solution to identify where those utilities are located and then provide that information back to the Department of Transportation here in Colorado. And we're in discussion with other states to also implement the same type of solution and potentially even the same mandate.
In terms of the way it works in practice, I mean, your sort of flagship product is something called Point Man, and this is something that can be used on mobile devices, so like a mobile phone or a tablet, which is portable. People don't have to buy new hardware to use it. It's that they can just be out there on site at the construction site, and they have this on their device, and they can access it that way. So it's extremely portable. It's extremely easy for new employees and people like that to get hold of, download, and start using right away.
Yes, correct. So again, it's a mobile and cloud platform. Basically, we're just a pure software company. And what we do is we integrate seamlessly into all of the major equipment manufacturers that are required to identify and locate where a utility is buried, and then capture that information at precision levels. Particularly, our focus is between about 1 centimeter to 10 centimeters, which is known as survey grade. And in order to do that, then we have to seamlessly integrate and pair to precision GPS receivers, not the receiver that's in your mobile phone or, in your tablet. Those are only accurate to maybe about, a meter to 2 meters. So you have to integrate into precision GPS. And then we capture all that information just on a standard mobile device. So any commercial-based mobile phone or tablet, we capture that information in real time, and then we push that information up to the cloud, and then it's readily available to whoever needs that information, including, out in the field or in the office in real time. So there's no delay. And that's really what's key to our system, is that, number one, you don't have to change any of your current business practices, meaning a lot of these companies have invested, a lot of money in current equipment that they're using. And obviously they don't want to have to reinvest. And that would be one of the roadblocks, if you will, from adoption is that if there had to be significant amount of money spent on buying new equipment, then they'd probably just keep doing it the way they're doing it. So we're integrated into all the major, for example, cable and pipe locate tool devices, including radio detection, which is actually a company based out of the UK. Also Vivex, Metrotech, Subsite, and then we're also integrated seamlessly into all the major GPS equipment manufacturers, including MLID. Trimble is the big one. We're a business partner of Trimble. But there's also several others that we integrate into. And then, again, you capture that information of precisely where that utility is located below the ground, capture it on the mobile device so that you can actually visually see where it is. That information can be shared with the construction crews, the engineering and surveying crews, even the excavators that are digging the hole in the ground so that they can avoid hitting these utility lines. And then it's pushed up to the cloud so that anybody, within any organization that needs this information can also have access to it. And maybe more importantly, what we can also do is we can update the records that they currently have, because the majority of records that utility companies have on where their utilities are buried don't have any real level of confidence or what we call precision associated to them. So this also gives them the ability to update their records. And of course, we say in the data management business, the better the data, then the better the business decisions.
That's I find this quite fascinating, particularly from the UK perspective, because obviously here a lot of the data seems to be still held by guys like Ordnance Survey, and we've got sort of subsurface infrastructure, some of which is 150 years, maybe almost 200 years old in some cases. It's very easy for people doing any kind of construction work using that kind of data, some of which is ancient, to actually go through a pipe that's been sitting there for decades and decades.
Well, exactly. I mean, part of the problem is that the data that we do have on where these utilities are located, as I mentioned, doesn't have any level of confidence or precision associated to it. The precision being identifying where it's located geospatially, below the Earth's surface. And the confidence level is the metadata associated to how that information was gathered, so that, I can make a business decision based on the data that's being provided to me. So that's one aspect that's an issue. The other aspect of it and component is the fact that, as you mentioned, probably around 50-60%, I'll say, of the utilities throughout Europe were probably put into the ground, over 60, maybe over 70 years ago. We didn't have the technology to identify where we were placing those utilities. And on top of that, there wasn't really as much government regulation and compliance to even, worry about it. And so it kind of compounds it. There's two issues. Number one, the data that we do have, we probably can't trust that data to make a good business decision. But the majority of utilities and pipelines that were put in the ground were so long ago that we didn't have any ability to map where they were located anyway.
Obviously, the company's not standing still at the moment. A couple of recent initiatives you've launched. One is one that will make it basically more durable for users of the technology, so that it doesn't use up as much power on the mobile device they're using. It's an innovation with Bluetooth. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so the way that we connect seamlessly to all these devices is through the Bluetooth technology, which I'm sure that most people are somewhat familiar with. So it allows us to seamlessly integrate into the other equipment manufacturers' devices. And recently, Bluetooth Lite was introduced, which basically means that we can operate seamlessly between these devices, and the efficiency of those devices is increased significantly. So we're not drawing as much power from them. And what that means is the worker can work longer because we're not draining, the battery like we were previously. So it makes our system and the other equipment systems just more efficient. and it allows the worker out in the field to work for a longer period of time. So that's great that we were able to leverage the Bluetooth Low Energy is basically what it's called. But on top of that, I think it also demonstrates and exemplifies that our technology is built on open source and also what's called open APIs, which means we can quickly adapt to new technologies as they're introduced, so that we can, continue to make sure that our system is state of the art, but also have the flexibility and be agile enough that if a new technology comes out and we think that it's, better as far as the operations of our system, we can quickly adopt it as well.
You've also, in terms of your distribution, you've been working on a new scheme for dealerships as well, which I'm guessing is going to considerably increase your commercial reach, at least in the US market. How does that work in practice?
What we want to do is to be able to leverage what we consider to be a distribution network. So, a lot of the equipment manufacturers that we have partnered with, including, as I mentioned, the cable and pipe locate tool devices, as well as the manufacturers of the precision GPS devices. They have a wide and broad network, not only in North America, but throughout the world. And because our technology enhances the operations and also the kind of user's experience, basically it's a win-win. So there's synergy between adopting and utilizing our software to enhance the performance and user experience of their hardware, so we can leverage those networks to resell PointMan. So anytime one of their customers comes in and wants to buy their products, it gives them an opportunity to resell our product and sell the customer on, this will actually enhance the experience they have with the equipment. And because there's distribution networks all over the world, it makes sense that if we have that ability, that we leverage them. And it also, significantly reduces the need for us to set up additional offices or, hire more salespeople, particularly if you're talking about, setting up global operations, which is part of our plan. And it's going very well. We're actually working with several equipment manufacturers that have operations here in the United States. We're in discussions with groups that are based out of, for example, Australia. And then, of course, the Trimble network, they have over 160 dealers around the world. And we're starting to leverage that as well.
I guess that's one of the things that when I first looked at the company, I thought was really interesting about it is, you're based in Colorado, but you're quite, in terms of headcount, it's quite a small company, but it's just the sheer scalability of this, because as you've just mentioned with the dealership strategy, you can be sitting in Colorado, but because we're talking about data and software and the cloud here, you can be reaching dealers and construction companies all over the world, even during pandemic lockdowns. I'm guessing that it should be we should be seeing ProStar actually expanding quite rapidly over the next sort of 6 to 12 months without the need for a huge amount of additional investment.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think that's one of the reasons that we are an attractive investment. Number one, we're SaaS model. So, basically it's a software that generates, annual reoccurring revenue. So you could have a pretty significant growth trajectory each year. The other thing that's attractive is what you mentioned. Currently we have 25 employees. We're starting to see, significant demand for our products. So I just hired 4 more employees, which is based on hiring a salesman whose focus will be on the Canadian market. And then we hired another mobile developer, and then 2 more cloud developers. And in reality, I don't see any need to hire any more this year, so that'll put us up around 30 employees. Our system is mobile and cloud. It's self-serve. So really, to get somebody up and operating, they go online and they download the app and they're up and running. So it makes us very scalable without the need to add significant resources, even as we grow exponentially.
You've also announced recently further tie-ups with the academic sector, where you're obviously doing more work with engineering faculties in the US. Could you tell us a bit more about that and about how that can help position ProStar going forwards?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of our, I'll call it methods of adoption and distribution is also working with academia. So, we're setting up partnerships with universities where their focus is, engineering and surveying, so that we can get our software, in the hands of the students, so they become, intimately familiar with utilizing and understanding the value of it. And, once they graduate and get out into the professional world, then they basically take our software, right into wherever, they're employed, and they are fluent on it. So it's a win-win. I mean, number one, we're providing our software to these universities, for free, so it's not a huge expense for them. We're also keeping them, up to date on the latest and greatest software that's available for their students. And then the benefit for us is that, as I mentioned, they become intimately familiar with utilizing our software, understanding value, and then they take it out, into the real world, where it would obviously increase our adoption rate. And we're working with several major universities we're in discussions with right now, and hopefully, over the next couple of years, we can have a large number of these universities utilizing our software, creating, more exposure and increased adoption.
Can you tell us anything else about the plans for the future in terms of further expansion of ProStar? Maybe anything else might be in the pipeline for the European market, or further developments with the company? I know you've recently primarily listed in Toronto in January, but more recently you've also listed in Frankfurt.
Yes, it's one of the reasons that we, wanted to list in Frankfurt, to give us more exposure in the European market. As I mentioned, as a publicly listed company, one of the benefits of being publicly listed is not only do you increase your exposure to the investment community, but a lot of times these investors might own large construction companies. They might be a director, within a large municipality. They might be involved with, in a large utility. So there's also the commercial exposure as well. But of course, one of the main reasons to list is the fact that it gives us the resources and the currency to expand. Our focus is definitely on the European market. I know that we're talking to a utility company recently, actually, in London. So if our technology is as disruptive as we feel confident that it is, then, the adoption rate will significantly increase, not only in North America, but it won't take much to jump the pond, if you will, because this problem that we're facing in all countries on not knowing where our buried infrastructure is, including utilities and pipelines, is starting to cause a major problem. It's not only a major public risk and environmental risk, but it's starting to actually create serious problems on economy. The majority of commercial and consumer goods that are still moved around the world is done by truck. And so if your roadways and highways and your bridges are becoming dilapidated and they're starting to fall apart and be in serious need of repair and replacement, then, as I mentioned, you can imagine what's going on underneath the Earth's surface, because by the time we see there's an issue with a utility line or a pipeline, it's often too late. You've got petroleum products that could be leaking into our waterways, into our lakes, even into the ocean. If a fiber optic line goes down, it causes serious problems, potentially with universities, major businesses, and hospitals. But also, if you hit a gas line, it can go unnoticed for a while, and then all of a sudden, these gaseous substances can build up. And then if there's some type of spark within the vicinity, you can have a major explosion. And I know that happens all over the world, and probably including, right where you live. And unfortunately, when that happens, houses and suburbs, can be blown up. And usually there's some level of damage at the public level where somebody is seriously injured. And unfortunately, we also see far too many loss of lives.
That's a very good point. And I guess also when you're looking at things from a strategic perspective, there's a lot of talk here in the UK about infrastructure spending and how the government is going to focus on doing a lot of infrastructure upgrades. Similarly, the same thing in the US. We hear a lot of talk about the need for introducing the new power infrastructure that's going to basically underpin the whole green energy revolution, and it's already starting to happen here in Britain. I'm guessing that's going to be quite a substantial opportunity for ProStar as well, because there is going to, by necessity, going to have to be a lot more digging going on.
Well, and it's in some cases from an entrepreneurial standpoint, you call it the perfect storm. So we're starting to see significant adoption, number one, in the market by some of the largest companies, government agencies. And so once that adoption starts to occur, it kind of creates a trickle-down effect throughout the market. We're starting to see that now. And then, as you mentioned, there's a lot of public and government kind of outcry right now that we got to change the way we're doing things because it's not working. And as I mentioned, it's a risk to the public and to our environment. And then on top of that, most of these large economies, if you will, throughout the world, they're talking about that they have to do something to fix the infrastructure because it's starting to have a global economic impact. So, for example, here in the United States, it's estimated that it would take $2 trillion over the next 10 years to get our infrastructure up to where it needs to be to support the economy. And on top of that, we can get into some numbers. For example, here in the U.S., there's $10 billion spent on identifying where the utilities are buried below the ground prior to any construction, $10 billion. And yet they estimate that there's still a $30 billion negative impact from the damages on those utilities on our economy. That tells me that whatever we're doing is not working. So if we're going to significantly increase the spend on our surface infrastructure, then it's going to have a significant impact on our subsurface infrastructure. And so, it's time now that we implement modern technology to identify, where these utilities are buried prior to any construction, or we're going to see, a significant increase in damages. And with the ProStar solution, we can address that. I'd also like to mention, from an investment standpoint, that we currently have 19 patents. So I know you mentioned the fact that we're not a startup. We're a little bit more mature than what you would consider, a startup. Is that, we have not only large clients, we have a proven technology, but we also have 19 patents, and I have several more patents that are pending. And basically what those patents do is they're basically designed around the processes and methods that are required to digitally identify, capture, map, and display underground utilities. And they're known what's called as pioneer patents. So a lot of the patents, when I started writing these patents, the technology wasn't even available.
So that means that you basically ring fence the intellectual property that belongs to the company and that will considerably augment its value.
That's correct. I think we're going to see, as I mentioned, the numbers. I think we're going to see significant growth in this market, even though it's already a multi-billion-dollar market sector. But we also have protective mechanisms in place that, if we're successful in enforcing our patents, that we might be the only company that can do that. Or I license the technology to other companies that also have a significant imprint in the market to utilize our technology based on a licensing basis.
Is there anything else you're able to tell us at the moment?
I'm really excited about our future. One of the things that I did, and I think it it demonstrates what we have developed, is also the level of executive management that I've been able to attract. I have a significant amount of experience in developing, GIS and data management systems, but I also recruited some pretty key resources, including, Vasa Dasan. Vasa is our chief operating officer, but prior to joining ProStar, for 15 years, he was the chief technology officer of Sun Microsystems services divisions for cloud. If you know Sun Microsystems, that's a very big company. They were eventually acquired by Oracle. And one of Vasa's accomplishments is he actually moved Wall Street to the internet. So he has a significant amount of experience in running cloud computing companies that are infinitely scalable. So that's one thing, is to build a technology that you feel has a significant impact on the market and provides significant value. But, one of the questions that often comes up is, how scalable is this? Well, thanks to Vasa and his team, our system works anywhere in the world, any language. We accept any currency, and it's infinitely scalable. So we have no limitations about, how many users are on our system in any country. And then Jonathan Richards, who's our CFO, has over 15 years of public company accounting, finance, and regulatory experience, particularly on the Toronto Stock Exchange and the Toronto Stock Exchange, the TSX Venture. And then Carl Lashua, this is kind of a play on Europe here. Carl has over 30 years. He's my vice president. He has over 30 years experience in building and leading information technology, operations, and program management teams. And formerly, he was the chief information officer of HSBC Canada, as well as Europe. And he was head of software delivery for HSBC throughout Europe. So I have a team that forms a backbone that is, very mature, has significant experience in scaling companies, particularly in mobile and cloud. And I think that's one of the key components of why we're going to be successful, because not only have we built the technology to be infinitely scalable throughout the world, but I also have the management team.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Paige. We'll obviously be keeping very close tabs on ProStar and its progress going forwards. And we look forward to having you back on again when there's more news and more developments at the business.
Sounds good. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to the Armchair Trader podcast. To get up-to-date commentary on what's happening in the share markets, both in Europe and North America, and our views on some of the emerging investment stories in the small cap space, make sure you check out www.thearmchairtrader.com and sign up to our free daily newsletter.